Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are, because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is Flipper's Revenge. You see what I mean? All right, so the intro for this has proven to be too much energy, but so this one starts with Mary being kind enough to remind me that with all of this attention being paid to Robin Hood today, that perhaps my spending as much time as I have in Sherwood Forest, it hasn't been quite the coincidence. Right? Not so much, maybe, perhaps, I don't know. But she also sent me an email this morning telling me that I should check out this video here. All right, and she told me to watch the first 2 minutes of it. So, when I did, I actually made it about 16 minutes in. All right, it's Hidden Hebrews 2, Children of Judah. And all this video has done is to serve to remind me how deep in the weeds I am on my next episode. Right, and so I'm just going to share with you guys real quick how deep in the weeds I am. All right, the next episode is going to be called The Gettysburg Express. Right, but the Mud City Paradigm Puzzle Tree has decided to turn this into quite the knot. And it's been very hard for me to untangle. And so I tried to do an untangling video, which I call When the Road Rose to Meet Me, which I hope to make both of these videos or perhaps combine them in a single video. And I even started a third video. I've got like 4 or 5 videos just based on what I was hoping was going to be a quick journey from bringing the Poe family from England to Ireland and over to the US, but it's proven anything but, right? And so I thanked Mary for reminding me just how deep in the weeds I am. Whoa. That made me realize that maybe I needed to start taking a look at some different sources, that maybe I was relying a little too heavily on the internet, right? And I happen to have this book here. And so this is The Dawn of European Civilization. Now, this is a massive coffee table-sized book that one of my oldest friends sent to me recently, and I'm absolutely certain that he spent more on the shipping than he did on the actual book. But it's a really exhaustive kind of book, and it's written by top scholars of the day. And I hope to be using this book as a resource going forward. All right, and so I was kind of reading up on what they said about ancient Ireland and so forth, because that's what the next episode is going to be all about. And I said, well, who published this book? Because that's the thing. What have I been looking at this whole time? What is my show all about? It's all about investigating the paradigm of false history. If our history is fake, who faked it? Who's selling it to us? And, why are we buying in the way that we do? And I'm going to talk more about this in the coming videos. So, I was curious as to who the publisher was on this one. And so the publisher was, I don't know if you've seen it here. And so this was published in 1965 with a second printing in 1966. And so I must assume that this is the second printing that I have here. All right, just a quick look, right? These are the writers who are going to be telling us about the Dark Ages and the dawn of civilization, right? And just to kind of zoom in on who they are, that each writer gets like a different chapter. And so like the introduction is handled by one David Talbot Rice, and here are his qualifications, right? He's the Warson Gordon Professor of Fine Art at Edinburgh University, right? And so the chapter on the East, Beyond the Frontiers of Rome, right? Written by David Oates, Trinity College, Cambridge, right? All right, and then we have The Empire of the Prophet. Gee, I wonder who this could be about, right? And it's written by R.H. Pinder Wilson, right? Assistant Keeper, Department of Oriental Antiquities, British Museum. Are you catching a theme here? That maybe a lot of this history is coming out of the British university system? And so we have this chapter, Between West and East, right? And it's written by one Serapi der Nersessian. Is how I'm going to say that one, right? Bringing it over to America a little bit. And I'm not going to belabor the point, especially as what we learn going forward. And so, of course, I had to Google the Thames and Hudson Publishing Company, right? And here we go with that, right? The world's great publisher of illustrated books on art, architecture, design, photography, fashion, lifestyle, music, history, right? Culture. All right, no doubt about it, right? The Thames and Hudson USA home. Publisher of beautifully illustrated books on art, architecture, design, photography, fashion, archaeology, and history. Combining art and history and architecture. Culture. Right? Dictating the culture. All right, so here's their... Wait a minute, All right, so now we're coming up on their wiki page. So let's take a look at their wiki page. All right, here they are, right? And I love that their logo has these two yin and yang dolphins. I was like, and it's called the Thames and the Hudson, right? And so the Thames is the major river that runs through London, right? And the Hudson River runs, pretty much straight down from Canada into New York City. And so I was like, geez, are there dolphins in the Thames? Are there porpoise in the Hudson River? So I had to look that up real quick. And sure enough, right, when I Googled dolphin in the Thames, right, there are sightings. Where's the dates? All right, for some reason, when I Googled this on my phone earlier, they gave me the dates at the heading of every one. But from like 2013 to present day, there have been porpoise and dolphin sightings on the Thames River. I mean, I was really astounded by that, especially because the Thames, at least at one point, not that long ago, was one of the most polluted rivers in all the world. Right? I think, right? And so for there to be dolphin and porpoise, swimming upstream enough to get to London. And so that's really amazing, right? And having grown up in the southern Connecticut area and spending a lot of time in Manhattan and being familiar with the Hudson River, I was like, well, there's no way that there are dolphins in the Hudson River. But sure enough, right, there are dolphins in the Hudson River, right? They're distressed and they die, but somehow they're swimming. The Hudson River, it does connect, I guess, to the Atlantic Ocean. And so maybe they're coming in that way, but I always, kind of think of the Hudson River flowing south from Canada. But there are dolphins that are swimming into the Hudson River area so that these waterways are becoming less polluted, which of course is a good thing. But it's really amazing that this publishing company, this Thames and Hudson, uses the double dolphin, and that in the last 7 years or so, dolphins have been spotted in the Thames and the Hudson. I thought it was really amazing. Right? And so here we go. Now, who published this giant coffee table-sized book with all these well-respected professors from Oxford and Harvard and all these, these are the people that are telling us about the Dark Ages and the ancient history of England and Western civilization, right? And so what does Wiki tell us about the publishing house of the Thames and Hudson? Right? Absolutely nothing. Right? It just goes right to a C also. Right? But it does say that it has a sister company in New York and it has subsidiaries in Melbourne, right, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Right? It's been an independent, family-owned company since its founding in 1949. Right? And so who founded it? Right? It was Walter Newrath and Eva Newrath. All right, so I had a little life interruptus there. So we're going to take a quick look at Walter Newrath here, right? And he was a British publisher, right? Co-founder in 1949 with his wife of the Thames and Hudson Publishing Company. All right, so Eric Hobsbawm noted, right, that there is no educated person in Britain with an interest in the arts who does not owe an enormous debt to the man who came from Vienna in 1938, who founded and directed the publishing house Thames and Hudson in 1949 and set it on the course which it still steers 39 years after his death. All right, there is no one, not one educated person in Britain who doesn't owe a debt to this Walter Newrath here, right? But again, this is pretty much all it says about him. All right, so going back, I wanted to look at his wife, right? Eva Newrath. All right, and now she was born on August 22nd, which is in 88, which is interesting, right? And, right, born in Berlin, the youngest of Rudolf Itzig, a Jewish clothier, with drapery playing the important part that it's played in this story, right? And so it says here, with the rise of the Nazis, she came to England with her second husband, this Wilhelm Feuchtwang, who was son of David Feuchtwang, chief rabbi of Vienna, which is kind of interesting. And it says that she married Walter Newrath, right, in 1953. So some 4 years after they started the publishing company, which I think is kind of interesting. But what's even more interesting is the fact that on my laptop here, Wikipedia kind of stops it with this. But when I was rabbit holing this stuff earlier on my phone, right, the Wikipedia article here, right, Eva Newrath, when we get to the bottom, her third husband, who she was his third wife, right, which is also kind of an interesting theme. People marrying for a third time. And that's something I'm sure I'll get into somewhere down the line, right? But it says that here in related articles, it lists Angela Hitler. I'm like, Angela Hitler? What? How does Angela Hitler fit in with this? All right, and so now, of course, from my phone, I was just able to click right there. So from my laptop, I have to do this, right? And so Angela Hitler was the elder half sister of Adolf, right? And she was the mother of this one, right? And she had a daughter named Gelly Jelly. I don't know quite how to pronounce that. Here she is over here, right? And she said that, and so she died at the age of 66. Coincidentally enough, right? And Adolf, her half brother, was born 6 years after her, right? Continuing those coincidences, and she's the only sibling that he mentions in Mein Kampf. Right after World War One, and so it says here that after World War One, she moved to Vienna, and the OSS created a profile on the Hitler family, which paints her in a positive light, right? Describing her as a rather decent and industrious person. It says she became manager of the Marissa Academia Judaica, a boarding house for Jewish students, right? Where she once defended those in her care against anti-Semitic rioters. Right? According to Langer, whoever that was, some of our informants knew her during this time and report that in the student riots, Angela defended the Jewish students from attack and on several occasions beat the Aryan students away from the steps of the dining hall with a club. Right? She is a rather large, strong peasant type of person who is well able to take an active part. Right? So Adolf Hitler's half-sister, whom he's very fond of, is beating away anti-Semitic Aryans at the doorstep. Right? That's unbelievable. Right? And it says that she heard nothing from Adolf for a while, but that he eventually invites her and her family to live with him. And so she and her family bounce around from estate to estate. And so after his alleged suicide in the bunker, right, he leaves her a bunch of money and his other sisters as well, but it's unclear whether they ever received any. But after the war, she claims that neither her brother, Adolf, right, nor she had known anything about the Holocaust. They didn't know anything, so she denies it all, right, which is kind of interesting given the whole false paradigm of our history. And I'm not going to get into all of that now, but it's interesting that Hitler's sister put forth that she didn't know anything about the Holocaust, he didn't know anything about the Holocaust. So that's kind of very interesting. But nowhere in here do I have any clue as to what relates her, right, to the Newraths. Right? Nothing whatsoever. But it's just really interesting that Wikipedia would list her as an associated article or someone associated with Ava Newrath. And so now in discovering all of this, I needed to know what Newrath meant, I mean, what is important about Newrath, this Walter and Ava Newrath? What does the surname Newrath mean? All right, so when I put this in, it brings up this author. And so I searched Newrath meaning, right? And it brings up Otto Newrath. And we're going to talk about him in a second. Right? But I had to go down to the House of Names, right? Newrath meaning, of course, the House of Names is going to give me something, right? But they really don't give me much. All right, so the House of Names tells us that the surname Newrath was first found in Baden, where the name was anciently associated with the tribal conflicts of the area. They declared allegiances to many nobles and princes of early history, lending their influence in struggles for power and status within the region. Right? They branched into many houses, and their contributions were sought by many leaders in their search for power. All right, so the Newrath family were like consigliere. I mean, they were influencers. All right, to these powerful families in this early European era, right? That's what the House of Names wants to tell me, all right? And so, of course, I figured that new was just going to mean like new, like something of recent vintage, right? But the first thing that Google gives me is the form new, an oncogene originally identified in rat gliboplasmatoma cells, which is overexpressed in some human malignancies, especially breast and ovarian cancers. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But of course, in German, it does mean new. Right? So if it means new, what is wrath? What are they the new version of? And so The first thing that Google says is that Rath is usually a circular earthwork serving as a stronghold and residence of an ancient Irish chief. And so now this plays in entirely to, what I've been looking at in these videos here, and how Ireland has just been a giant stumbling block for me. All right, so that's really unbelievable, especially because I'm trying to find it from a German origin. But the first thing that Google gives me is this Irish earthwork stronghold. And we're going to look at more of those down the line. All right, but I actually had to search for Rath as a meaning German, right? I just was scrolling forever. All right, and so in German, Rath means advice, new advice, right? Listen to your new advisors who are publishing history books like this one. Right? The dawn of European civilization. And not only that, all these modern magazines and publications about art and architecture and civilization, I mean, they are dictating culture. Our new advisors, the Newraths, with their publishing house and so forth. All right, which is really unbelievable to me. But when I first looked up Newrath meaning, it had the name Otto Newrath, right? Because I wasn't getting anywhere with Ava and Walter. I mean, they just kind of dead end. They don't really tell me much about them, at least with Wiki, and not diving deep into the internet to see if there's anything else I could find out about them. But the first name they did give me was this Otto Newrath. All right, now this guy is an unbelievable character and also ties into the use of popular culture as societal control. I mean, it's really unbelievable. All right, and so here we go. Let's get blotto with Otto. And so he was an Austrian-born philosopher of science, right? He was a sociologist and a political economist, political economy. He was also the inventor of the isotype method of pictorial statistics and an innovator in museum practice. And so he gets his PhD in the Department of Political Science and Statistics out of the University of Berlin in 1906, same year as the Jubilee. Right? And he has and his thesis was titled "On the Conceptions and Antiquity of Trade, Commerce, and Agriculture." Again, and so when I see that, I see the planting of the history of what we were to expect when we look back at what trading in antiquity looked like and what business in antiquity looked like. Like he helped create that paradigm to put in our false historical narrative. And so I don't really want to get into his career, but I think it's interesting that, he joined the Social Democrats of Red Vienna. All right, today, Social Democrats, of course, are very, very blue, right? But it's interesting that it was Red Vienna. And I wish I could get into all of that now. But what I want to get into a little bit is his ideas, especially the isotypes, right? But his ideas center around the philosophy of science and language. And when you think about our history as being created as a false paradigm, and when you think about the idea that language is a spell, right? And that by telling us things orally, and by teaching them, makes our minds more readily available to believe them. It's interesting that he has a philosophy of science and language, right? And it says that Newrath's work on protocol statements try to reconcile an empiricist concern for the grounding of knowledge in experience with the essential publicity of science. Newrath suggested that reports of experience should be understood to have a third person and hence a public and impersonal character, rather than as being first person subjective pronouncements. And I don't know why, but this makes me think that what he's saying is that we can get them to believe what we tell them. I don't know. Right? It says one of his later works, this physicalism, right, completely transformed the nature of logical positive discussion of the program of unifying the sciences. Right? He talked about the construction of a universal system which would comprehend all of the knowledge furnished by the various sciences, right, with the absolute rejection of metaphysics. Right, in the sense of any propositions not translatable into verifiable scientific senses. All right, now I can't tell you what all this means. I mean, to me, all they've done is egg-headed a version of what his real accomplishment was, which was this isotype. And so let's take a look at isotypes real quick, because what the isotype method, right? It's a method of showing social, technological, biological, and historical connections in pictorial form. right? It consists of a set of standardized and abstracted pictorial symbols to represent social scientific data with specific guidelines on how to combine the identical figures using serial repetition. And so now, if you ask me, this is nothing more than Paul Linebarger's psychological warfare of using pictorial images in advance, right? This is what I've been talking about in this show, and a lot of other researchers and channels have been talking about the sublimation of the human subconscious via media. I mean, and that's really what's happening, right? And this pictorial language, this isotype language, is something that everyone can relate to, right? When we look at these pictures and symbols, and everyone has seen them, right? It's really unbelievable. And so all of this starts in Vienna with this with Otto Newrath, right, in Red Vienna, at this Gesellschafts- und Wirtschaftsmuseum, right, that Newrath was working for, right? And it's unbelievable, right? Newrath stated that the museum was not a treasure chest of rare objects, but a teaching museum. The aim was to, in quotes, represent social facts pictorially and to bring dead statistics to life by making them visually attractive and memorable. Dead statistics. All right. One of the museum's catchphrases was to remember simplified pictures is better than to forget accurate figures. Right? Remember the pictures, let them in print. It's better than accurate information. It's better than accurate information elsewhere, right? It's all about imprinting things visually, and through language. Right? And this Otto Newrath was all about that. And he created this system in the 1930s. And it's one that is in use today. And I'd love to get more deeply into this, but I really haven't done it. But I just wanted to have a little fun with the history. It's been a while since I posted a video, and I don't know how much of a coincidence it could be that, when I tried to connect these families, which I really couldn't do, through the Genie page, his name is actually Dr. Phil, Otto Karl Wilhelm Newrath, and what his relationship to Ava and William Newrath, who published, The Dawn of European Civilization could be, but, again, I just thought this was a fun little exercise in showing, and demonstrating just how easy it could be that our history really has been manipulated, and how taking a deeper look into the families and trying to make these connections, how easy those conclusions are to make, right? And so I'm going to close this one out here. I hope you guys had fun with this one. I certainly did. And so remember, guys, just because you don't know the truth doesn't mean you can't have fun with the lies, right? And so until the next one, cheers, guys. All right, so I have an unbelievable cherry to put at the top of this one. And it's got my adrenaline pumping, so hopefully this makes sense, right? But not only is the coincidence involving Robin Hood and my investigation into the false history paradigm and looking at this Poe family as a possible hidden royal bloodline, and the Poes being the Powells and Jerome Powell sitting as chair of the Federal Reserve, and how my investigation comes out of Sherwood Forest with all this Robin Hood nonsense, right? It's just absolutely amazing. But I also wanted to make a connection with the Thames and Hudson Publishing Company and their Yin and Yang dolphins to what I had discovered about the Hotel Indigo back in the spring when I was doing my King of the Hill investigation, right? And how they were using the Hotel Indigo as like a go-between in this Chinese visa program. Like, you could buy a permanent visa for like $500,000, right? And possibly connecting that to the Chinese spy scandal of a few months back. And so when I went to bring up that Baltimore Sun article, it said that there was a fire at the Hotel Indigo, and I was like, "What?" Right? It was on June 16th. How hadn't I heard about this? Right? June 16th, my video was published on April 23rd, and I was thinking, "Oh my God, could they be related?" Right? And so I wanted to take a look. What did they say about the fire? And this here is really just a series of photographs. Right? There's no article about the fire at all, and it's really kind of lazy, right? It's just a bunch of pictures of the firemen who get one picture of smoke coming off the roof here. All right, but it's just mostly pictures of the firemen standing around, right? But I did find a Reddit, right? And they had some video of the fire. And I'm thinking, oh my God, could they have been burning records of their visa program on the roof? So I wanted to see if there was any information about the fire at all. All right, and this guy says I saw a comment somewhere from the general manager who claimed it was started by a beehive they had on the roof. A beehive? Are you kidding me? With all the beehive symbology that I've seen around this town is absolutely unbelievable, and what the beehive means. But this is just crazy. How my investigation into the false history paradigm has been yielding these very crazy results in the modern narrative. It is just unbelievable.